Hello, everyone. Welcome to Jackie Does Stuff. I'm Jackie and I do stuff. And today I am showing you me from the past doing a repair job on this hoodie that I got from my brother who left it behind when he left. So here you see me putting some of my materials down that I'm going to be using to take care of that hole. So I got my pin cushion full of straight pins, some 100% cotton black thread, a little container full of safety pins, some scissors, and that is my needle holder. Inside, I have some needles of all different sorts, some yarn needles, a plastic yarn needle, which is what I'll be using in a little bit, a regular needle, which I'll be using to actually do the repair, and a bunch of other miscellaneous needles, big and small. Yeah, that's the one that I'm going to be using. Little did I know that that needle had a big barb on the end of it, and it would give me such a headache going forward into the repair. So here you see, gonna be doing this repair at 2x speed, and also I'm using this new to me tripod, so you can see me kind of fidgeting with it. So you can see that pocket on the front of this hoodie has been torn away from the main body of the hoodie. So I'm just going to be sewing it back on, which is pretty easy, but this sort of thing is a really good way to practice your basic skills just to make sure that you're doing it right at times that are kind of more important than this. So what I'm doing here is I'm using the safety pins to kind of mark where the pocket is supposed to sit on the body of the hoodie. Now this material is actually really stretchy, which is kind of difficult to work with. So that's why it looks like I'm really kind of having a hard time dealing with the fabric, and that's because I was. Yeah, but you can mark that location in any way. You could use the straight pins to do it. You could use chalk or a marker to do it. Or you could also just not mark it and you could kind of just wing it as you go along. But I wanted to show you this way of doing it because I want to demonstrate that you can do this without any real, equipment, any expensive stuff. You can kind of just do it the way I'm doing it here with this plastic yarn needle and some, rusty old scissors. So what I'm doing here is so the pocket had ripped away and the thread holding it on was kind of sticking out. So you don't have to do this, but this is another one of those things where like putting in a little bit of extra effort is going to take your repair to kind of the next level. So I'm taking out the thread with that yarn needle, and then here I've come to the end, and this is a lot harder to remove the way that I was doing it. So actually I'm going to kind of speed this up because I spend an embarrassing amount of time doing this. So normally what you would do is you would use something called a seam ripper, and a seam ripper is a really fantastic little tool where it's got kind of like a sharp needle and then it kind of curves back and has a blade on the inside of the curve, so you can kind of stick the needle in through the thread and then kind of force the blade to cut through it, and it cuts like one thread at a time, which is really precise and very, very helpful for stuff like this. As you can see, I'm trying to use this plastic yarn needle, and a pair of scissors, and you can get the job done. As you can see, I'm doing that. I'm going in there kind of like one thread at a time, snipping and pulling and snipping and pulling. That's kind of what you would do with a seam ripper as well, but this is a little bit more difficult because the scissors are not as precise. They're much bigger, and as you'll see in a little bit, sometimes you can cut the fabric that the stitches are adhered to, which is not great. You don't really want to do that, but I do that later in this video. So but it's okay because this is actually a donation item. So this is a hoodie that my brother left behind, but he doesn't want it, and I can't exactly donate it with that giant hole in it, so I'm just going to go ahead and fix it before I donate it. So this is a good time to practice for me because I'm sure that the person who ends up with it is not expecting a perfectly handcrafted item, and they probably will be just fine with a little bit of even if they notice that the pocket was put back on, I'm sure that they won't notice, or rather, I'm sure that they won't mind. But yeah, the seam. The reason why the ends here of the two ends of the pocket take so long for me to get through, and the rest of the pocket didn't, is because when you're sewing with a sewing machine, which this undoubtedly was sewn with a sewing machine because it's official sports ball merch. A lot of times, instead of doing what you would do with hand sewing, where you would just tie like a knot at either end, what they'll do is they'll call back stitch. So they will they'll run the machine backward over the same spot that they started on. So they'll go forward and then backward and then forward again, and that creates a really really secure stitch at the front and the back of the stitch that you're trying to do. So at either end of this pocket, but that makes it much harder to take out because it's the stitch goes forward and then backward and then forward again. So these ends are where you're really going to need to kind of hack through it. But yeah, it takes me a really long time to get all of those threads out, and you can see I'm actually going in and I'm pulling it out as I'm going along, and then I kind of snip some off, and then I keep going. And that's a good way of doing it because that keeps everything from getting tangled, which can really kind of like ruin your whole day. Also, earlier on, I had realized that I hadn't put I hadn't marked the location of the ends of the pocket, so I went ahead and did that at some point during this bit. Yeah, so there I have removed that one side of the pocket. I'm taking the threads out, kind of checking it, making sure that it looks as good as new, and then I've moved over to the other side. And yes, this is a much better close-up of me. This is where the seam ripper would come in handy. You would just run the seam ripper, straight parallel with my left index finger there. You would just run it straight across, and it would just rip that seam right open. So I've sped this part up again a little bit because this is just the second verse, same as the first. I'm marking the location of the pocket, the end of the pocket, and then I'm going to go ahead and hack and slash through that. And it will be done pretty much the same way as the other side, except this one I think went by a little bit faster. But this one also is where I think I ended up losing my patience a little bit and kind of relying on the scissors more than I should have. And you'll see that I actually do cut a hole in the fabric. So if you're working on something that's really important to you, you're maybe going to want to be more patient than I was, just to make sure that you don't end up doing kind of little slips like that. It kind of sucks to work so hard and then kind of like trip at the finish line like that. So, but yeah, it's also because this is not an item that I really care about that much, and because it is just going to be donated anyways. This is a good opportunity to work out some of our technique. So since I created that little hole, all I did was I just decided to try to, when I attach the pocket, which I do in a minute, I just try to kind of sew over it so that it isn't visible from the outside. And also I kind of try to pinch the hole closed with a stitch when I do sew it. That's not really like a good long-term solution, but it is one of those things that it can prolong the life of things like this. A stitch in time saves 9 and all of that. And there's the hole. So at this point, I take out my straight pins and I start pinning the pocket into place. Now, the way that you would do this, I mean, you can kind of pin things any old way. It kind of doesn't really matter, especially if it's something that you're going to finish in one sitting. But when I was in theater school, I learned a particular way of pinning things. And the reason I'm struggling here is because of the texture of the fabric, like because it's so stretchy and because it's so thick because of all the layers, the fold of the pocket, the fold of the hoodie underneath, the fact that it's at the corner, so there's a second fold there. It was a little bit difficult to manage. But yeah, so what I've done here is you can see that I take the straight pin and I insert it into the top piece, into the bottom piece, and then back up again through the top piece, and then I leave it right there. I don't press it farther in. I leave it so that the tip of the pin is kind of like the only thing that's in the fabric. And the reason why I do that is because that's how my teachers always taught me, and they said that's like just the safest way of doing it. When you pin something, you really don't kind of need the whole needle. You kind of just need whatever needle is within the part where it's pinned. Like, that's the part that's actually doing the work. And then if you just kind of push the tip of the pin out a tiny bit, that also keeps it from kind of like sticking out in the middle of space and being, super out of control, and it makes it less likely, though not impossible, to stick yourself with the point of the pin. And then also with the tip sticking, or the head of the pin sticking way out like that, it makes it easier. If you were going to be sewing this on like a sewing machine, for example, it would make it easier for you, the operator, to take the pins out as you go along. Although in that case, you might pin it from the other side. You might kind of like if you look at where the pins are right now, you might see that they are, kind of the heads are pointing toward us. You might want to have the heads pointed the other way. All right, so here I am threading the needle with the regular thread. And what I've done here is I've kind of just put the end of the thread through and then just left it there. And then I take the long side, and I just tie a double knot in it. Now, back when I first started sewing when I was a little kid, I used to always take the thread and then fully double it, take both ends, put the ends together, and then tie a knot at the end with both. But you see me doing it with just one side here. And you see that I'm holding the eye of the needle between two of my fingers there. And this is actually like a really cool technique for doing repairs, because if you thread the needle and then you double up the thread, you get a really strong stitch, which is great. But if your thread tangles, which it often does, especially if it's old thread like I use, because I usually just keep everything until it runs out. If it knots, you're kind of SOL. You kind of just have to cut it and start it over. But if you do it this way, then if there's a knot or whatever, you can just slide the needle right off, and you can deal with your problem. So the way that I'm anchoring the thread here is just what you saw there. I have kind of made a stitch and then made a second stitch right in the same spot. I usually use my pinky to kind of manage the length of the thread as I go along as well. Although I don't think everybody does that, but I just find it easier. It helps me kind of like manage the length of the thread in space. So I then put the needle through the fold of the pocket, and then kind of slid it over maybe like 1/2 centimeter, and then just drew the thread a little bit taut. You can see I'm actually not fully tightening the, oh yeah, that's the barb on the needle that is bothering me there. I'm not actually fully pulling it taut. And the reason for that is because you want to kind of do this lightly. You want to have it, all the threads be pretty loose like that. And then you kind of want to pull it tight as you go along. Now, it's at this point that the video got kind of corrupted a little bit on me. Not this is just an effect. But yeah, I did end up finishing the entire pocket, but I couldn't, something went wrong with the video and I didn't get the whole thing. So this is it for me. But thank you so much for watching. See you in the next one.